Hey everybody, William D. Raymond here. This is a show of my self-portraits, starting from the beginning, 1982, brush and ink. The wonderful music of Scenes with John Stoll, a great jazz band and a great jazz guitarist there, plus a beautiful drummer and bass player, great trio. Along the Way, it's called. So, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about myself. It's harder to do than I thought it would be. Anyway, I started painting in 1982. That was a couple years after I met someone, a great 20th century master sculptor and painter, Antonio Salemi. He was in his 80s at the time and I was in my 20s. He died in 1995 at the age of 102. He was an artist in New York City for 43 years. He studied sculpture in Rome pre-World War I, and he was in Paris on the Guggenheim Fellowship in pre-World War II. So he's had quite a brush with the reality of 19th century, 20th century art and history. Anyway, he was a great friend and a great art teacher. So I started painting. I didn't realize I was going to paint when I first started hanging out with him. I was just so impressed with his work that I thought I could sell it, which that became a very difficult practice. But a few years into it, I decided to start painting myself. And what I started practicing was what I call the aesthetics of spontaneity. The aesthetics of spontaneity. And of course, under his guidance. And previous to being an artist and previous to meeting Antonio to the point where I became intimately connected with him as a friend and as someone who was promoting his artwork. I was involved with yoga, and I had actually wanted to devote my life to yoga and just liberation from this wheel of birth and death and yoga. I was something of a bhakti, wanting to merge with devotion into the supreme divine divinity, God, whatever you want to call the absolute. Prior to yoga, I had a practice where I did LSD, and LSD actually. Well, I was introduced to yoga through Be Here Now and LSD. Be Here Now led me to a mantra. I was doing LSD. When I did the mantra with the LSD, that took me into a clear white light experience, and that kind of put my life on a trajectory that I hadn't realized I was going to be on, which was the yoga practice. I wasn't a very good yogi, to put it in judgmental terms, but I was trying, and my discipline wasn't the best, and my character wasn't the best. And eventually I left. I didn't actually leave yoga, but I was practicing yoga at an ashram for a couple of years. and I got involved with what they call Sahaja Yoga, where it was understood that one's life energy, or prana, became the guiding force as opposed to one's will. The will was directed by the prana. And when I left the ashram, I returned back to where I lived in Pennsylvania prior to that, and hooked up with Antonio, who I had known briefly before I left for California a few years earlier. And then I began my study of art in earnest. And of course, like I said, I didn't know I was going to start painting when I studied with him, when I began studying with him. I just wanted to know about art and enjoy the work. But like I said, I practice the aesthetics of spontaneity, that's what I call it, and I learned that from Antonio, because he was very much involved with the spontaneous. And that was what my yoga practice was involved with prior to meeting Tony, was the spontaneity of the life energy was really primary to the path of renunciation that I had involved myself with in order to free myself from this burden of existence. But having met Antonio, my perspective changed a bit. And actually, once I began painting, I was so enthralled with the act of painting and self-expression that I actually said to myself, I don't care about liberation. Just let me be reborn again and again as an artist so that I can continue to express myself in terms of painting. Now, 30 to 35 odd years later, I'm a little less inclined to that kind of vow, but it's still very much a passion of mine, painting. And as I approach, dying, and the end of my life, I'm in my late 60s now. Maybe I got a few years left, but as I approach death, I'm no longer, I'm more interested in liberation than. But that's an issue that very profound and deeply personal issue for me. I'm not sure what's going on with me at this point, except I have a body of work that I've created over the last since 1982. And here, like again, this presentation is of self-portraits I pulled out from that. But the hallmark of everything is the brush, the spontaneity of the expression, the honoring of the mark, and in the spontaneous. And by doing that, you begin to understand something about rhythm in terms of the visuals, in terms of the brush, in terms of color. And you transcend the self continually in that process. It's a yoga practice for me, as well as an aesthetic enjoyment. But you'll see, brush and ink has been a big part of my practice. And of course, that's a Zen medium. Initially, it's in a baseline practice for me. It's a Zen medium, which is very conducive to the spontaneous, and that's the Zen, The watercolors, you can see the immediacy and directness with which I'm working. Compositions. color harmonies. Tony said to me, color and form are one. And of course, with contemplating that for a few minutes, you begin to realize the truth of it. That everywhere you look, there it is, color. It's a vibratory rate that is completely essential, intrinsic to the universe of form. It's not separated. They are not two things. When you're a visual artist, it's very important to realize that color and form are one. So self-portraiture, the portrait is a great motif. It's an archetypal primary motif in the art form. I like to incorporate portraits in terms of the overall compositions with still life, with landscape, something I took from Tony's example. Yeah, I use permanent marker a lot as well. It's kind of, to me, it's something of a 20th century Zen medium. It's got a big personality, and it's a lot of fun to work with in that spontaneous energy. Color and form are one, so it's brush, color, rhythm, self-expression, the medium, tool of expression, color, motif, personality of the artist, all in balance in the spontaneous energy of self-expression. When you become the medium, you also raise your consciousness. The real joy of painting, becoming the medium and allowing it to express itself through you. Yeah, I like to say the abstract nature of reality is the source of beauty. So it's all abstract. The medium itself is abstract. And I believe that the representational element adds something to that abstraction, raises it to a higher frequency. Anyway, here we come to the end of this, and thanks for having a look. My paintings are contemplative doorways, and I hope you enjoy this selection of self-portraits and paintings. There's a lot to deal with here.